Welcome to the Olive. Now, if you're new to the channel, this is a thing that I do every once in a while when I can. And just talk about something. I give my honest thoughts about things that are going on. And usually it's going to be like a late night stream because my kids are in bed. One of them, I'm watching their sugar levels on my phone because he's diabetic, as some of you guys know. And we're testing out some things. So I'm staying up late just to keep an eye on things. And I thought I'd talk about the Doug Wilson stuff. Now, we've talked about Doug Wilson quite a bit here on the channel over the last couple weeks because of No Quarter November and all the chaos that has brought. But you know what? We're here to talk about him again, but it's not really about him. I mean, it is. It definitely is. But it's mostly about his wife. Now, part of the thing about the Olive is that I have something to drink. So right now, I'm just working on the good old classic Bullet bourbon back there. The very last couple drops that I got. And we're going to be taking a look at all this stuff with Nancy Wilson. We're going to take a look at the Wilson kids making a video, doing their own stream today, doing some cleanup for Mom. Because Mom said some stuff, and about 2.3 million people have seen it. And now they're being like, oh, crap. No Quarter November kind of backfired on the Wilson family. You know, they came out literally guns blazing. You know, they got the torch going and burning up, going full Trogdor on Elsa. And, well, the flames are pretty hot, especially when you got a lot of stuff uploaded. And you start saying random stuff like this that is just like way out there. So we're going to take a look at it. Like I said, I got a drink if that bothers you. I'm sorry, but that's what this show is. You know, it's one of those things. People are making fun of me for going so late. Dude, it's so late. Hey, how's it going, Heidi? And everyone is just like, why are you doing this? Not for long though. That's okay. You don't have to stay. If you need to go to sleep, go to sleep. I'm just going to be up anyways. So it's like, am I going to go sit upstairs and watch YouTube? Or am I going to talk about this stuff and finally get a stream in? So Aaron says, dude, I just got back from seeing Christopher Paolini and having him sign one of my Aragon books. That sounds rad. I don't know who that is. Sorry, man. I know what the Aragon stuff is because of that one movie that they did, but I don't read a lot of that kind of stuff. So let's talk about some things that I pay attention to. And that's mostly what's going on Twitter. And so this was from an account, Poison in Moscow, Idaho, I think is like the account that came up with this stuff. Probably had this, logged away in some file and was like, hey, this topic came up and put it out there. And so I want to give that person full credit. So it's Poison in Moscow, Idaho on Twitter who found this and put it out there. And like I said, 2.3 million people saw this thing. And it's pretty awful. It's pretty awful. So let's just take a look and see what Nancy Wilson, you can see Doug Wilson sitting right there. This was some kind of conference that they were doing about parenting. This is older. So this is, I'm guessing by that blazer that he's wearing. It's probably like 2008, I would assume. 2008 to 2010, something like that.
Rachel was visiting a friend. She's probably 3 or 4 in that before school age. And our neighbor had little kids, and so we would trade back and forth. So I went over to pick her up, and when I walked in, she said, oh, is it time to go? So I thought, perfect opportunity. I got her home. I didn't address it there. But I did give her spanking. It's true. I did. But I just said, when I come in, you're going to say, hi, Mom. That's how we do this. So the next time she went over there, I did the review. Now remember, when I come, you're going to say, hi, Mom. You're not going to say, oh, I didn't want to go. So it was beautiful because then when I picked her up, it was just all that, yes, Mom is here at last. Yeah, but it's just that training.
It's just that training, guys. You just got to train your kids that are before the age of school So she says 3 to 4 years old. And because they're disappointed that you came to pick them up from their friend's house when they were having a good time. Spanks. And not just spanks in that moment. Spanks when you get home. And that's like, this is being talked about as if this is good parenting. Like, this is what you do. This is how you train them to understand, like, to be excited about you being their parent and being happy to see you walk in a room. One, nobody has to be happy that you walked in the room. Now, maybe if there's one thing I want to, give her the benefit of a doubt and say it could have been this way. It could have been that this little girl was freaking out that mom was there. She goes like as if she's disappointed. It could be that this kid is freaking out and she's being nice here, but that's not what anyone has said from that camp. And they've all come out today, and we'll take a look at the video. Like, they all came out today to defend this and say this is fine and this is good and this is holy parenting. But none of them said, like, hey, actually, it was a full meltdown and everything was crazy. She was screaming her head off. Now, there are lots of different opinions about spanking. Some people will always look at any form of, like, physical action in discipline as abuse. I got to say, I'm more in that camp than I am of being just like absolutely fine with it and being, like you could do it all the time. My form of discipline is taking away things and, timeouts and things like that. And I found that to be a very helpful way to discipline my kids. So I wouldn't recommend spanking for pretty much anybody. But I understand that there's difference of opinion. We're also talking about difference of culture because I'm here in Canada. Things are very different here in Canada. You're in the United States. That's very different too. But think about this. The implications of someone just being disappointed, like taking, what she said and saying that's exactly how it went down. Okay. A kid is disappointed that you came to pick them up and you're not happy about that. And so you bring them all the way home, which it's Moscow, Idaho. So it's not probably like a 30-minute drive, most likely, but you get them home. So there's a distance there in time and location. And then you're explaining to a 3 or 4-year-old, this is why you're getting disciplined. All right. And I mean, like she says, I don't know, she was probably somewhere around 3 or 4. So she might have even been younger. It was before school though. So she's definitely not 5. All right. So we're talking about a very young toddler. And you're saying this is good parenting. Even if you're one of those people, I think you're wrong. But if you're like, this is the way we discipline, okay. But you're taking them from the place where it happened and putting them like way after the fact and then telling this 3 or 4-year-old that this is why you're getting disciplined in this way. That's crazy. Like that's really bad. I would say that this is abusive. Like to do that to a child. One, it's so manipulative to be like, you have to be excited for me to walk into a room. I was having a conversation just last week with some people talking about, how everyone has to say hi to everybody. No, you don't. You don't have to say hi to everybody. You can be nice and cordial to people, but saying hi to someone might just look like a head nod rather than being like, hey, how are you doing? And getting like super happy and starting this whole conversation every time you see every single person. If that were the case, we'd never be able to make it through our day. Like, people are people. And also, you might not like that person. Maybe you don't want to have like a full-on conversation with that person. You're an individual. You got to think for yourself, be a person. And what that is taking away that personality at all. It's okay for a kid to be disappointed that they have to go home. It's okay to be disappointed. Oh, it's mom. Oh, man, I wanted to have more time. As long as there's not like this flip out, breaking stuff. I can't believe it. Holding on, to the door and be like, no, please let me stay. But from all accounts, that's not what happened. It was literally just what Nancy said of just being like, ah, and you spank the kid. Now, there have been other videos that we're not going to take the time to look through because I don't want this stream to be all that long, to be honest. I'm just making sure that numbers are good, and then I'm going to be hitting the hay. But I wanted to tackle this because, like, it's not just this. She actually had another video go out where she was talking about this child coming out of her room, and I think it's the same child, and I think maybe even the same, like they're sitting at the same table and stuff. So like around the same time, this kid is coming out of her room, and she said she's giving them like 8 to 10 spankings. She said that's what Nancy said. 8 to 10 spankings every time this kid came out of the room, and it happened over and over and over and over again. I don't think spanking works. Like, even if you're that kind of person that's like, hey, you know, this is my right as a parent. Again, I think you're wrong. But even if you're like that, I mean, you got to look at effectiveness, right? Like, even just as far as just having like, hey, this is actually working. If that is happening, it ain't working. And to go on like anywhere, whether this is just like a little church conference, whether they made a video and they put that out publicly, this isn't like someone like went through the trash. Like, this is on their stuff, and they went and found it. Poison in Moscow, Idaho went and found this. It's publicly available. So they're putting it out as like promotion of like, this is what we teach. This is what we're about. Like, that's awful. That's so bad. It's abusive to just hit a kid over and over and over and over and over again. This is not like, oh, you grab something, slap of the hand a little bit, and like, you need to stop this. This is over and over and over again, and you saying this is just how you do it. Well, maybe the timeout would work. You know, like, different kids are different people, and they react differently to different kinds of discipline. And maybe that kid would be better helped by not being hit over and over and over again. And yet, these guys, it's so clear that this is wrong. Even if you're like, again, if you're a spanker and like as a parent you think that you have that right, again, I think you're wrong. But even if you're one of those people that you're just like, you get to do it all the time, you just got to look at the effectiveness of it and go, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with what she's describing. There's something about this age and like the distance. There's no way this is going to be effective for this kid. So you're just hitting them. Why are you hitting them? Because they were disappointed, not like that you were there. So what's really going on? Now, I'm not going to speculate exactly what's going into the mindset because I don't know. But there's obviously something going on. There's other kinds of frustrations. Like, we all know that as parents. We discipline sometimes in frustration. You know, like that kid came out of the room again. Are you serious? It's the 5th time tonight. You know, you get that Raphael Ninja Turtle taken away. Like, and you're just mad, and you just take that Raphael and you're just like, you ain't seeing this for a week, bro. Like, you take it away and you're mad. Like, to say that you don't ever do that is ridiculous. I knew a pastor one time who looked me straight in the face and said that he never disciplined his kid out of anger. He was also covering up a whole bunch of other stuff. The dude was a liar. Okay. Like, that's what that is. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, okay. Now I know. Now I know what kind of person you are. But this is not some angel, like this angelic thing of being like, oh, I'm such a caring mother that I just hit my kid repeatedly. Like, no, there's something else that is going on here. There's a bigger problem. But these people, well, they just don't care. They don't care. How is there some people hanging out with us? It's past midnight where I am, to answer Mike's question. What time is it there? It is a little past midnight. That's what it is. Grew up getting spanked. We're a little over a year and into not spanking after examining scripture. Well, good for you, man. And I will say, like, you know, it depends on your background and how it was done to you, that you probably have differences and having to even think through it. Some people, they just go like, that's just discipline. That's the way I was raised. So like, I'm not one of those people that's going to come in and be like, you're abusing your kid every single time. But I will say, like, you need to think through it. You need to think through why you're doing it. Is it actually effective? Is it a kind of venting thing that you're doing here? And when your kid is just disappointed that you walked into the room, I think there might be something to venting and just being mad that that kid doesn't want to, isn't excited to do that. And that's what she was even saying, that she wanted to build that kind of excitement to obey. Guys, no one's excited to obey. Jesus wasn't excited to obey. If this cup can pass, please, Lord, take it away. All right. Yes, he became obedient even to the point of death on a cross, but he was praying for that cup to go somewhere else in the garden, right? He was not excited to obey on that. So we do have biblical example. Let's see. Monofox says, also just a thought. What if it's a kid with autism where there's difficulty with social interactions in general? I have a kid with autism, and I can tell you one thing. That kind of discipline would never work with him. It just never would. And so for someone like Nancy, they would be just hitting him over and over and over again. It's not going to have any effect. Not at all. Different kids are different. We're all wired differently. Take autism into account too, and there's going to be even more of a difference. So yeah, every kid is different. Carol's here and says it is raining. That's wonderful. I love the rain. I miss the rain. We don't get rain here. We got snow last week. It's all melted now. Thank God for that. But we get storms. We don't get rain. Kind of stinks. I love those rainy days. I'm from Seattle, so I love getting my angst on, going to a Starbucks and looking out the window and just going like, I wonder what my life could be if I just got out of the basement, like that kind of stuff. Ed's here. Hey, Dr. Romine. Yo, I was spanked for calling my now deceased step-grandfather, whoa, words we don't say on the channel. Even if it's, the olive. He turned off my NES at night to save electricity. It was, what is SMB3? I don't know. I'm not a gamer. We were too poor for games. On World 8, I deserved it, but Nancy was wrong. That was a long way to say Nancy was wrong. I'm so sorry about your game too. It's 10:06 where you're at. Okay. And Monofox is right there. Are you guys together? Stars is here. Hey, how's it going, Stars? It was done in anger in my case a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of people experience that exact same thing. How's your boys? My boys are doing good. I'm just staying up late watching some numbers. We had a great, for anyone who's been praying for us, I've asked for prayer several times because we've been having just getting used to all this diabetes stuff with my son, who's also autistic. He's type 1 diabetic as well, which is a very complicated mix. So we've been trying to figure some things out. Just had an appointment with this diabetic specialist team. It was great. They're saying he's fantastic. He's doing well. I was putting way too much stress on myself. Some different, we have to make some changes, but it's more about just being looser about things. And apparently that's how you get better at it. So I'm just going to follow the doctor's advice. So we're just watching some things tonight while we deal with this stuff. Oh, that's Super Mario Brothers 3. Okay. All right. No, I do not have dual citizenship. My kids do, but I'm American. My wife is Canadian. Maybe someday. It'd be nice to vote and stuff. And I appreciate that, Carol. It means a lot to me that I could come to the community and just be like, hey guys, we got a need. And you guys are always like, we're on it. And it's fantastic. All right, let's watch another one of these things because, that clip went around. And like I said, all over the place. 2.3 million people saw just that one video. And then there was a bunch of different people sharing other stuff going on with it. And then the Wilsons all got together today and did a stream. Now, today is Wednesday, so it's not like their normal streaming day for this No Quarter November stuff. Make no mistake about it. This was an emergency. This was an emergency cleanup PR scheme. Where let's get all the kids together and let's defend mom and tell them that everyone is wrong for just listening to mom's words because mom's a great person So you don't know her, so it makes it all okay. And oh man, there's some stuff. Let's just watch for a little bit. We got about maybe 8 minutes of video altogether between a couple clips. We'll just take a look and talk about it together.
Last night after I found out that I had become such
a star,
such
a victim, such a victim.
Me.
No, you got your get out of jail free card.
It was an amazing hard time I had, and I just
This doesn't help, by the way, because you posed as a victim our entire childhoods. So now that you finally have achieved it,
yeah, finally, it's what I was hoping for all along. It's what I've been striving for. But now that it's finally come to me, I don't know what to do with it. I'm like a little
victimhood
lost.
is thrust upon some people.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, it was like an empathy
you were once
flash
commanded.
mob. It was a shocking
But an empathy flash mob that would like to see mom rot in jail.
Well, that's the thing. It was so funny. As it was like
out the wazoo.
The tender mercies of the wicked are cruel, and you have all these people being. Poor Rachel when she was 3. I hope CPS took her and her mother is rotting in jail.
I appreciate
guys. That doesn't sound like kindness that you're offering me here. Like this sounds like a really.
You mean I could have been in the foster system?
That time when I got grumpy at the Busby's house. That time
let's tie
should have
them
ruined
into this scandal
everything.
at the E-Free pastor's house. Let's get them in. At the Busby's house, you had a bad attitude, and mom made you control your emotions. How dare she?
But this is the thing that really struck me. I did not dive deep. I blew past a lot of this. So yes. I don't even know the bulk of the arguments. However, the thing that really stood out to me about this is I was like, well, you people, I think you're cruel parents.
Yeah.
Like these are the people who are all advocating for if your little girl says, I think I'm a boy, to chemically make her infertile forever.
Yeah, get
and
those
if you
ovaries
think
out
that
quick.
my loving, faithful, tender Christian mother was cruel, well then we're equal. I think you're cruel. And you apparently think that my life is cruel.
Let's have a song.
Wow, a lot to decipher there. I'll save some of it for counselors to figure out, qualified individuals. I'll just take the superficial stuff. All right, at the end, let's deal with that last part of basically Rachel being like, well, you think that my upbringing was cruel. I think you're being cruel parents. So basically, what my mom did was fine because what you guys do is worse in my mind. Like, one, that's not all the people coming at this. Like, I'm a very conservative, theologically conservative individual, and it's definitely not my perspective on how things should work with gender, and I still view this as terribly wrong. And I think there are literally thousands of people online who saw this thing and fit right into my camp on that. So it's definitely not like, oh, it's all just those people. I feel like what she's really trying to do is kind of separate and be like, well, the worst of the worst, you're not going to agree with them, right? And the worst of the worst that she could think of are these people. So basically saying like, oh, well, they're all extremists. And so I view their parenting as bad. One, even if that were true, which it's not, those aren't the people that are coming at you, that doesn't mean anything. Like, it would be like, to use an illustration, which these guys just constantly use, is very difficult to watch, like more than like 3 minutes of them conversing. One, because they're all yelling over each other. It's like a Fox News debate or something, but also because of the use of illustrations. Like, they really got that from their dad, where it's just like every 25 seconds as they're talking, it's like one illustration mixed with another and then going into another one, and it's just very difficult for me to listen to, at least. But to use an illustration, it would be like you rob a bank and being like, well, it's not as bad as the murderers. And like, okay, well, maybe someone would look at that and be like, well, the murders are wrong. Like they're a lot worse. I agree with that part. But also robbing the bank is pretty dang bad. And we got to deal with that. like it doesn't excuse like the parenting here to say that, oh, well, those parents, they're wrong. And then also for them to be like, what would be worse All right. If someone called CPS, because there are people who are like, wow, I can't believe this happened. She should have been taken away, which, that's definitely not, I think, the first recourse that anyone has, like in this conversation, is not like immediately your kids are just gone. You just go into foster care forever. One that shows like just a lack of understanding about how the government, wherever you're at, pretty much deals with these kinds of situations. It's never that, unless it's like, a different kind of abuse or a very substantial amount of abuse. But if it's something like this, well, there would be conversations, there would be classes, there would be learning exercises, there would be ways of the government stepping in and saying, hey, you can't treat a citizen of this country in that way. You're violating this person's rights, even if you are a parent. Like, you got to stop doing this. And there would be different things that the Wilsons would have to do in order to, make sure that they're on the right path to treating that person well. So that's like to say like, oh, what's better? You want my mom to go to prison for what she did? Well, one, I would say that's probably a lot of kids who have been actually abused. Like, like this, we're all dealing with this one clip of this one situation, but let's just say like an actual, like, full-on abuse case, and we all know it's abuse. Like, probably most of those kids are saying like, I want to be with my mommy and daddy. Like, they don't know any better. Like, and do you think like they're going to be like, yes, take me away? Like, no. Like, it's ridiculous to be like, oh, well, what's better in this scenario, to go live with foster care or to deal with this right here and with my mom? And you don't know my mom, so it's fine. You don't know her heart and what she was doing. Like, those are not like logical arguments for like being able to say something was okay the way it happened. Like, it's just excuses. It's just excuses to say, well, you don't understand the full picture, which of course we don't understand the full picture. But man, it's just odd to hear this kind of argumentation from people that are like sitting there and talking about how, oh, we used to have arguments all the time. We're so sophisticated. We're so sophisticated here at the Wilson's house. What? Star says, you can't say we want the parents to have more control and also say these parents are extremists. Yeah. Steven says, whoa, I wake up to an Underdog Theology stream. Sweet. It's 6:18 a.m. in the UK right now. Man, it's early. It's early. What you doing up so early, Steven? There are a lot of people who grew up out of fundy circles in my observation. I think the abuse contributes. Maybe. I have no idea about that kind of stuff, about what like the stats would be and all of that. I am on Graves, so perfect time for me. Oh, grave shift. Yeah, that's what that means. I was like, what are you doing? What do they call it over at Bethel? Like that soul sucking or whatever it is they lay on tombs. It's like, Mitchell, what are you doing? Stars, you can't say we want the parents. Yeah, okay. But at the same time, say parents are extremists. Conservatives need to message better that abusive parenting is wrong and there's a limit. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. They need to start being like, hey, this is actually what it is. But they just don't, because, again, you don't know their heart. So let's listen to Doug Wilson himself.
A number of them grew up in straight-laced conservative homes that were no fun at all.
Yeah.
Right. And right. So dad was severe, mom was severe, everything was cinched tight, and nobody ever laughed about anything. Mm-hmm. And they think, so when they hear something like what we're talking about, discipline or high standards or required obedience or whatever, they filter that through the grid of their experience. And they think there's no way that that's not exactly like what I grew up with. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, there is such a thing as goo families where you have everything is all over the place, just emotional sprawl, and then you have the people who are buttoned up, no emotions at all, immigrants from northern Scandinavia, and
or who stuff everything really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they
pressure-
and they
usually
leave.
pressure
They
cooker.
say we're unemotional, but they leave out the fact that anger is an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're
And
explosive.
bitterness and
Yeah, those are all emotions, and so if someone says, "Yeah, well, that's I've seen that with my own eyes." Well, I have too, plenty of times.
Yeah.
I've seen
No,
that sort of.
plenty of the ex-evangelicals were actually driven there.
Yeah,
no,
chase-
and actually lived through horrific family life debacles.
I would just like to say, for the least the last 5 seconds, there's been a whole lot of empathy here.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
So
but
what were you?
also-
But what
Yeah,
were you
but what's-
going
Oh,
to
yeah,
say?
you were about to say something else.
So the point is, I would say that the thing that you want to look for is this a family that laughs together?
Yeah.
What? Like that's so here's the big key. Here's the big key to understanding if we're dealing with a real abusive family or if it's just, something to be ignored. He doesn't even give categories for things. It's just if they laugh together, if they're still happy. If they're still happy, it's fine. Just don't worry about it. All these stories, that come out about this church and Doug Wilson and his counseling. I mean, just this week we had another victim, a survivor of abuse in this circle, and specifically at the school there, come out on Twitter and just tell her story. Emily, I'm forgetting her last name, but you can go on to Twitter, examining Moscow, examining Doug Wilson in Moscow. Whatever that account is, if you go examining Doug Wilson, you'll find them on Twitter. They've talked a lot about her story. You can find that out there. But with all that going out there, you think they would be a little bit more cautious about some of the things that they would say about, these categories that they use, and try to be make it at least seem less likely that these things could happen. And it's just if they laugh, if they laugh together, it's probably fine. We're probably just dealing with a family that's a little bit more conservative, and so it's not that big a deal. And there's probably not more going on there. And you definitely don't have to call the cops. And you definitely don't need to do an investigation. We definitely should only believe the men here. You can see where this all goes. But think this guy this week. This week, I saw some people talking about how Doug Wilson is the modern C.S. Lewis. You're telling me this is the intelligence? When you're talking about counseling scenarios, and even right before this, I edited a little bit to cut out certain sections because I didn't want to be here all night. But he was talking about let me talk pastorally. And so this is what he does as a pastor. And he's well, if these families are laughing together, then that's how you know if there's real abuse going on. Are you kidding me? Do you know how many survivors of abuse cover up for their abusers because they feel that's the right thing to do? Because they've been brought up in a system where everything is about honoring your parents and honoring teachers and authorities, and you never go against that authority. You submit to the authorities, and also everything that's sin is your fault. You were asking for it. That was also a conversation that was going on just this week with Joe Rigney and Doug Wilson going at Karen Swallow Pryor and saying some awful things on Twitter about the culpability of young people who are not adults when it comes to abuse. And do they have any culpability? That's what they're getting at. This isn't whimsical. This isn't what brilliant rationality. He's literally saying, well, if they're laughing, it's probably good. It's probably fine. You got to look out for the people that aren't laughing. This guy doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand what victims go through, survivors. I'm sure I'm sure there are people that he's actually helped. I'm sure not every, circumstance has been a train wreck. But there have been quite a few over there in Moscow. So take that into account. But also, if this is what you're putting out there on the internet of this is me solving things, this is me making things better, is to say, well, if they're laughing, it's fine. It's not that big a deal. We need to, just let people have like those more conservative ideals, and so they're going to discipline a little bit differently, and that's the sign that we need to be looking for is their smiles. Really, how many abusers are having photos taken smiling, or survivors are taking photos smiling with their abusers, not just like familial abusers, but like at school, at church, at different environments. It's happening all the time because we live in a society where you're supposed to, cover up things, or at least that's what people are made to think. And like just being like, well, if they're laughing. So crazy that this is someone that everyone's like, oh, this guy we need to follow. Like, come on, we got a lot better out there. He does kind of look like Santa. That's a good point, Carol. Like, not that much jolly though. I'll say that. Steven says, I get up early so I can do some Bible study and listen to sermons before work. And here you are hanging out with little old me and the rest of the underdogs. He probably got grave soaking. Grave soaking is what it is. Bethel's practice. I like soul sucking better. Like, let's make a movie. Maybe the Demon Slayers can get on that. Make a movie. Soul Suckers 3. I don't know. Soul Suckers 2, Electric Boogaloo? Maybe? No? Carol says, Mr. Wilson is 6 years older than me. He looks a lot older than me. Well, he's got some city miles on him. Heidi says, the irony of spanking your kid till they smile and then telling people look for smiles. Wow. Yeah. Yep. $100%. Yeah. Brilliantly said. Like yes, you are training them. You are forcing them, manipulating them, shaping them into being people who will smile so that no one knows what's going on, because you've trained them that way through hitting them repeatedly over. Oh, mom's here. As a parent, I'm a pretty strict parent. Like I'm an Italian guy. I'm conservative. I want my kids to obey me. Go figure. And so, yes, my kids get disciplined, not like this, but they do get disciplined. And I've learned as my kids are growing up, they're getting a little bit older, and I got to give them a little bit more room. And I gotta let that like immediate, like, how dare you disrespect me? Like when they're like, you got to let them have those moments where they can kind of not talk back to you and not be like, oh, I'm not going to do this. This is so dumb. Like that with a chore or something, but just to be like, you got to let them have those moments so they can start figuring out how to have an identity for themselves, how to think for themselves, and not be like, oh, you always smile, never talk back to me. They're a person. You got to help form that person. And as they get older, got to give them a little bit more room to be that person. Sometimes that person's going to rub you the wrong way. And you're just going to have to sit there and be like, wish that wasn't the case. But, if it becomes a problem and it keeps on happening, then there's a conversation to happen. But like, let them have a little bit of room because they're a person. And that's the thing that a lot of these like do parenting in this way and you'll have success. That never works because they always are like doing like this cookie cutter as if every kid is the same. And they never are. Every kid is different. And then like you add in a lot of these people like just write off all kinds of, neurodivergency stuff. They're just, no, that's not real. It's not real. That's just like psychology stuff, and psychology is the devil. So get that out of here. And like you add in all those kind of facets to it and you're looking at things, and parenting is very difficult. And it's not so like cookie cutter. It's not so like, oh, if you do, steps 1 through 3, you're always going to end up at the same place. And you're going to have this perfectly, it's not like a baking recipe. If you follow that baking recipe, you're going to come out with that thing, unless you're me and I can't bake. I could cook, but I don't bake. But my wife does, because she wants to make her priesthood holder happy. What is the standard bearer? Standard bearer, Heidi knows. It's a standard bearer, right? Like that's what Doug Wilson talks about. She wants to make the standard bearer of the house happy, so she bakes. But if you follow that recipe, you're going to come out with the same thing pretty much every time. Unless something else happens, you don't have the right ingredient, whatever. But if you follow that through, you'll end up with that finished product. That's not the way parenting is. Parenting is not a recipe. You can't go through all this stuff and end up with like the same kid or, around the same kind of person. No, and if you do, it's probably because you forced it. And you probably forced it through some pretty awful means. Carol says, I'm half Italian. I don't have the Italian look. I looked like my dad. He wasn't Italian. He was Arnold's race. Arnold was the governor of California. Arnold. We have to get to the chopper. We have to get to the next one. Did we already watch this one?
So, like, if you went back and look at
let's watch this. This one's interesting.
That episode where what mom is saying she did. If she was upset with me for complaining when she got there, if she was fearful that I didn't like her and that I liked my friend better than her,
or if
she was like, oh, how could you? And then discipline me, that I can see the argument that that's manipulative, abusive, nasty, but I know mom and I know my childhood and it was none of those things. Like it was actually, and mom and I have now had almost 43 years of a very sweet relationship with no periods of
estrangement
periods of estrangement. Straight through my teen years, mom and I were still friends.
So once again, it's okay that this happened. It's okay that my mom did that to me because, she's a good person and I know her heart. Oh, you do? Like, oh, okay. So you knew her heart and what was going on when you were 3 to 4 years old? And you knew exactly what she was thinking and you knew exactly that it wasn't because she was, disappointed or anything about how you acted. It was just about like this righteous ideal of, you just need to be, submissive to your parents in this specific way, which isn't the case. You can't say that's about submission to parents with just being disappointed that you have to go home. If again, taking Nancy at her word and saying that's everything that happened, it wasn't like this huge screeching match or whatever. And Rachel says that she was grumpy at whoever's house. So I'm assuming that that's correct. Yeah, that depiction of how things are. And so, like, you're not going to see anything in scripture that talks about that, like, of, it always has to be like this smile on your face when you obey. Like, no, that's not how people are. Again, that's not how Jesus was. Like, when he had to do things he didn't want to do, like, he obeyed, but it wasn't like this smiling, happy-go-lucky kind of thing. And, to just be like, hey, you just don't know her heart. I do. And she was fine. She was a good person. Said every person whose parent went to prison for what they did, whatever it is, if it's abuse or something else. A lot of kids, someone in the family is going like, well, you don't know my dad. You don't know my mom. You don't know their heart. Okay, but they still did that thing. Like, it doesn't matter what their heart was in it. They still did that thing. That thing was wrong. So there's consequences. Like, that's the way it works. You beat your kid repeatedly. Doesn't matter if you're like a deacon. Like, it doesn't matter if you're like really involved at your church. And most of the time you're a great person. You beat your kid that one time, jail. Like that's what it's for. But you just don't know her heart like I do, even though I don't, because I was 3 to 4 years old at the time. And again, everyone should be like, haven't we learned anything in the last like 20 years about like social media and everything? Never be surprised that someone who is a nice person could do something like, maybe I shouldn't say this one, but like, there's a comic book. I don't want to be too nerdy here, but there's a comic book where Joker is trying to convince Batman that anyone can turn into him if they just have one bad day. They're one bad day away from becoming as evil as the Joker. And so he goes and he just torments Commissioner Gordon for a day and does like the worst things imaginable to Commissioner Gordon and his family. And he's trying to prove that. And it's kind of true. Like, people are one bad day away from doing something that they shouldn't do, right? Like, people who are like the kindest individuals, but someone says that one word that triggers them, and next thing you know, there's a fight. Now, if you're Draymond Green and it keeps on happening, maybe you should get a little bit more than 5 games of a suspension, but that's sports. We don't do sports here. All right, let's watch the next one.
Jesus said, here's what a Christian looks like. And everybody's like, stop.
I really love the tight little cycle of stop telling people that they have to, whatever.
Oh, yeah. This was interesting to me, that they're talking about like this parenting stuff, and they're trying to be like, well, we're a whimsical family and we're just smarter than everyone. So we just always have, these things that we're talking about. And we're always going back and forth, and we're always laughing, and everything is perfect and dandy at the Wilson house. So let's not talk about the time that my mom talked about hitting me repeatedly. Let's just talk about all the fun times. And then they're just like, oh, and, like, let's throw in some, federal vision stuff. Like, let's just throw it in here. Let's just let's talk about works-based salvation and how dumb it is that, people like Theocast and myself and others are saying, like, actually salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, and Christ alone. Like, nah, you need to do something.
Or confess their sin, or lay down their lives for their family, or stop telling them, whatever it is. And then they say, because all they have to do is look to Christ. And I'm like, which is a thing that you need to do. And when you do it, when you look to Christ, and of course it's only by his grace that we ever can look to him in faith. It's like, it's such a funny, like, stop telling people they have to do something. They must look to Christ and rest in Christ, which is a posture that requires you to do something. Like, you got to put that bitterness down. You got to do,
Well, on top, basically, I think this is a root confusion that a lot of modern evangelicals have about the relationship of grace and works.
Mm-hmm. Oh, tell us, wise Wilson, about this difference that we need to understand.
There is such a thing as works righteousness, where someone's trying to climb up a ladder to heaven, right? There are people who do that. And there are antinomians who want to rest in grace, look to Christ alone, and it doesn't change anything about their life. They're not taking care of their kids. They're not teaching. They're not correct. They're not doing anything. What are you doing in there? I'm looking to Christ. Well, the Bible says in Titus that instruct the people to be zealous for good works. Mm-hmm. We are in Ephesians. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. So we're not saved by good works, but we are saved to good works,
which he prepared in advance for us to walk in, which makes it funnier to say rest, don't walk in those.
Right.
Well, and I'm just picturing a crowd nearby saying, how dare you, when you're supposed to be resting. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we see those crowds in the New Testament, but they weren't the good guys.
Yeah.
Right. And so basically, how is it possible for God's workmanship to fight the workman while you're on the bench? And he's preparing you, fitting you out for the good works, which he prepared for you to do. And you start thinking of the workman working on you on the bench as some sort of legalist, because he's going to try to get you to do something.
Yeah.
And so then you start fighting him, or fighting people who remind you to cooperate with the workman.
It's a dark place to be, really.
This is what he made you for. And
okay, so we've talked about this before. I don't want to go into detail. I have a video here on my channel, all the same things I usually say when we get into this topic. It keeps on coming up. I'm not going to give an explanation of federal vision every single time. You could go to that video and you can watch it. You can go to Theocast's video, which is better than my video. I don't say that often, but it's better than my video, and they do a much deeper dive. But you could also go to mine, and I'll explain what I view about federal vision and all of that. But here, for him to just be like, these people who are, they don't want obedience. It's kind of like he's tying like this idea of, well, what, Nancy was trying to get out of Rachel was obedience, happy obedience. And that's what a Christian should do. A Christian should have happy obedience to Jesus, to God's word, and that you should live like this holy life. And I mean, there is truth to that. Like, you cannot, Martin Luther said, that faith alone is what saves, but faith that saves is never alone. So there always comes works. And this is where people get confused with the Westminster and how he describes things, because the Westminster does talk about, if you're Presbyterian, that's like the standards that you use. And I think the 1689 is way better, but whatever, we'll go with that and just say, okay. But that's talking about after. It's talking about after, like a salvation that is genuine, that is true, that is real belief will result in works. That's true. But for him, even this subtle thing that he did, where he starts talking about Ephesians and how, we were created, like we were shaped before the foundation of the world, we were called, right? That's what Ephesians 1 is about. And we were meant for like these good works. We were created for those good works, that God has these good works for us to do. But he's talking about it as if it's like right now. Like as if like we're talking about salvation. At that moment of salvation comes the works. No, that's about like the whole aspect of salvation being like from eternity past. And that gets into Calvinism and all that kind of stuff. And whatever you view about predestination, whatever, it is scripture to say that before the world was formed, God elected some for salvation. And in that election, he made them for good works, that they would do good works. But that's not talking about like at the moment of salvation, you do those good works, or that those good works become part of that moment. And they keep on doing that of like, you got to submit to the lordship of Christ. And in that moment at salvation, that's what it means. And you're going to be doing good works. And we want to see those good works. And if you don't show those good works to the level that I say is good works, then, we can't prove your salvation. So in my mind, you're not a saved Christian. Like, that's where this stuff leads. And it's just funny for me to see him be like, all this stuff about abuse, and he's trying to be like, it's not that bad. And then at the very end, just be like, and also let me just throw out like this heretical stuff that I keep on talking about and adding works into this moment. Just come on, man. Like this guy, he's just bad news all the time. It's just bad news. And I just find it so funny that this is the time where this is coming out. It's not a funny conversation, but it is interesting, the timing of it. And, this wasn't just like something that, was orchestrated. Like there wasn't some movement that was going against him and whatever. It's just someone shared his own video and that was public domain and just put it out there and we're like, hey, come on. It's there and this is messed up, right? And then 2.3 million people were like, yeah. And here he is doing PR when he should be flaming people, like he got the flamethrower out and he's here roasting everybody. And yet he's the one who's getting burnt. And it's because of his own actions. It's because of his own stuff, things that Nancy said, things that he said. There was one point where he made a joke about how they had a holster for a wooden spatula that they would hit their kids with, spank their kids with. If you're using wooden spatulas, belts, things like that, that's not spanking. That's getting into something else all together, regardless of your views about spanking. Like that's something else. But here we are, coming to an end of this and just being like, what is going on? Like there are people who, even with how messed up this is, they're still defending this guy, still defending him. Like, okay, maybe you don't understand exactly what he means by federal vision. You don't want to watch the OCAST video. So you're just like, whatever. I don't understand it. It sounds fine to me, whatever. There's just all this stuff. Look at the fruit of this guy's ministry. Just person after person coming out and saying like, I was hurt in this church. I have this story. or all the rudeness and just like real malice that's out there from his own followers, from Joe Rigney just this week. Go and look at Joe Rigney's tweets this week. He was taught by Doug Wilson back in the day. I said it was problematic way back in the day. I mean, like, again, first time I saw Joe Rigney sitting on a couch doing one of those like theology nights for Bethlehem, and him and Andy Nasley are sitting there, and they're just being like the most prideful dudes, like specifically Joe Rigney was. And I was just shocked because you got all like these other guys like sitting there, like doing all these conversations before on their stuff. And then here comes these guys who were still in, you know, at that time, still in seminary because they're just going to the school there that wasn't accredited. But they're there and they're just talking about things. And it's like, who is this guy? And then you look him up. Oh, well, he's also going and learning from New St. Andrews. He's at Doug Wilson's school and still over there with John Piper. And just like these guys, even you could see it with Jared Longshore and his videos. And regardless of whether you liked him in the past with Founders, you could see that there's a definite change since he's over there. And just all these guys, Michael Foster, you know, people that he brings in, Dale Partridge, Joel Webbin, you know, these people that he brings in and is like, you know, kind of mentoring in a way. It always ends up bad. It always ends up bad. And Mark Driscoll platformed Doug Wilson, guys. Here's how it happened. I said this before, but Doug Wilson's doing his thing over in Moscow, Idaho, and no one knew who he was until, well, like people in his circle sure did. Moscow is a pretty small place, so I'm sure a lot of people there did. But as far as evangelicalism, nobody knew who this guy was. And then here comes Mark Driscoll, and they start having him come and speak and write blogs for, you know, the Resurgence. Next thing you know, Doug Wilson's speaking at John Piper's church, and then that gets him bigger and bigger. So if you want to blame anybody for Doug Wilson being as big as he is now, you could blame Mark Driscoll and you could blame John Piper. And the fruit is awful. What do we do with it? We just say bye. We just say bye. If you got to deal with these things, deal with these things. If you have people in your life who like Doug Wilson, share this video with them. Share other videos that I've done. Share Theocast's video about Federal Vision. You know, share a whole bunch. Go on to Examining Moscow and Doug Wilson, their account on Twitter, Poison in Moscow, Idaho. Go to these accounts. Share those things. Like, that's how you get the word out. And I get a dislike. Hey, Moscow fan, how's it going? How's your No Quarter November going? Is it going well? It doesn't seem like it's going so well. Oh, man. People aren't going to be happy with me. I swear I'm only drinking Coke. I don't know what that comment is so full of errors. I don't care about errors. As long as I can understand it, then it's good. Casually changing words of the Bible, right? Just, you know, change it here and there and just make it a little bit easier for my theology to fit in. Israel says election for service, not salvation. I'm not sure what that was in reference to. Sorry. Sean, love the channel. Keep up the good work. I appreciate that, Sean. Heidi says, again, with the only two ways, Doug is so binary. Yes, he is. And what do we know about fundamentalists? They always make it so black and white, and never any nuance. No, there's actually a lot going on here, but oh well, that's the way it goes. Anyways, I think it's late enough. I've waited long enough. The kid seems fine. I'm gonna hit the hay. I don't have any hay. There's no hay to hit. No, I'm not going to go with that joke. I could say some jokes, but I'm not going to. All right, that's about it for this stream, guys. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you are new to the channel and you like what I had to say, well, maybe you'll like some of the other things I say on Monday on my Underdog Theology podcast show thing. 100 episodes in, I still don't know what to call it. Anyways, I will see you at some other point. Maybe Friday. we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. Life is crazy right now, but that's what this stream was. Just to give you a little something, and honestly, because I wanted to talk about these things. I gotta say hi to Elijah. He's here. Doug and the patriarchy crowd never fails to depress me, right? It's always happening. It's just like, come on, really, this stuff. But honestly, we know this happens so much in evangelicalism, all this stuff about Gothard's style of parenting or Wilson's style of parenting or all these different styles of parenting. And you find out later, the fruit of that was this kid got abused. This kid got hurt. This kid, lost their individuality. And that's big to me. Like, that's something I've learned over the last couple of years of having a son who's autistic and having other people try to shape his individuality and rip it away from him. And me just having to be like, he's his own person, get real intense about it. I've learned quite a bit about kids and their individuality and how easy it is for it to just fade away and for them to become reflections of things going on around them rather than their own person. And in these circles, yeah, they don't know anything about that. But Mitchell says, thanks for the video. People are saying, Night Dean, they're saying, get offline, stop talking. You got to go to sleep. Well, you know what? I'm going to keep